I used to live behind an irony curtain. I didn't always have a chorus of crows to herald me. Always seeing myself from an economic station, able to walk amid the cream and dregs of society. The psychological schism the workaday creates in crushing one into a gray Kafka drone, when my real spirit is a giant. This show should be an explosive release of the forces of personal discontent, a battering ram blueprint for the upheaval of the dull corporate Spielberg, Disney America we inhabit. But I too have been overthrown by the same forces of repression, hypnotized into self-destructive consumptions that began innocently enough, and then flower into the dreadful realization that the mind and health were a Gulf War apart. I started drinking coffee when I was 19 and a teacher's aide at the Santa Monica Alternative School. I found the buzz enlightening and empowering. I started drinking it when we were working on the play Henry IV Part 2 by Willie the Shake, and were keeping late hours. I remember still the first cup I ever drank. I put some milk in it and Sarah Deal stirred it with a pencil because there was nothing else in the family room to stir it with. Maybe it was actually the graphite I became addicted to down the years. But down the years it became the scintillating additive fuming away by the side of my typewriter in a 20-ounce Winchell's cup, the brown dirty water fueling my passion to create old word wisdom out of the stenching of the new world odor, my chrome ink spurting giddily in a fountain of erosion, scalding the tribal and the individual, inveigling the ancient from his lair. But now my mood elevator is crashed at the mezzanine of Koyaanisqatsi dry goods, and there's no one trapped in this car hanging by a cable, not even Summer Zanar kept pale and alluring to help me transcend. And the main irony being, Starbucks coffee shops sprout like mushrooms after an acid rain on every street corner in caffeine America. America has turned its sleepy elfin coquettish eyes to the same gruel that was once my savior, and all the nymphets chew languidly on delicious cancer sticks, an approximation of lurid indifference, the nasty sex vibe jag of smoking cigs, another guaranteed death fix that's so alluring. So I've come to this. This is the first faint stirrings of my medical journal, a reclaiming of my body from the pincers that ensnare and enslave it, and waste it on the half-altar, half-auction block that is America this century. A desperate search by all to find out what appetites feed them and what appetites eat you alive. Norman Cousins, the editor of Saturday Review, put his cancer in remission by massive ingestions of vitamin C and the release of laughter in the medium of Laurel and Hardy movies. And Gloria Swanson triumphed over her tumor by natural foods that made it shrink and diminish. My medical journal is veering more into the Robert Louis Stevenson variety, though. The fear that someone else is destroying my real nature and living in my body, and that someone else is the dim shadow of corporate Republican Democrat politically correct America with this nice cutthroat soft-spoken veneer. It's soft-spoken because it is cutthroat. That manifests in the night like a cliché iguana or the passive snake ready to strike but camouflaged in sand. I look at my own hands and I expect to see Buñuel's ants crawling out of a crevice in the palms, because I think the Andalusian dog has bitten this golden age and the rabies are coming on strong. I used to think everything happens for a reason, and now I just think things happen. And we construct the reasons later based on who we're trying to please with the explanation. All I know is cigarettes are a bitch to kick, and this is the hour of kicking bitches. Just ask the late Eazy-E or the newborn militias. They'll confirm that kicking bitches is where it's at, so maybe I can kick cigarettes like they were a bitch. Yep, fear of women is the best and easiest hatred of them all, but don't get me started now. I'm not a deep social thinker. I am on the surface where everyone else thinks, or else how else could I diffuse their poison mind thoughts coming at me? Like the last guest we had, on which show I had an anxiety attack I had to edit out. Bill Mitchell. He's your typical daiquiri radical, spouting the huge monolithic evil tale that keeps him afloat. He's like the perfect plant from the government to discredit all progressive movement thinkers, fueled by no facts save the sound of his own bombast resonating. Bill vomits on and on. FDR bombed Pearl Harbor, Clinton bombed Oklahoma, and he's a true man of the people, except if the people happen to ask him a question. He'll just kind of turn away and grab his coffee for a sip. Come the revolution, he'll probably reach for a jacuzzi instead of an Uzi. Believe me, living in isolated splendor up in Malibu Ranch with his lovely female bodybuilder, easy for him to cast endless doubts and obfuscation and never offer a solution to the quagmire. Bill doesn't even realize the riots were hypnotized in by white corporate America. The Rodney King was shown night after night in slow-mo to piss off people so that they would react with a riot and be further destroyed in their own inner city, further burnt down, and then occupied by Bush's police in a Bush stops crime scenario. Bill thought it was just a good old uprising. It probably looked like one up there in the Malibu Hills. And he also thinks O.J. was framed by the government, black conservative, with no social activist profile whatsoever. Bill doesn't realize it's all just a soap opera shown all the time, so you never think about organizing unions or getting a higher wage for workers or organizing America's workforce. It's like just the other day I heard on Channel 4 the phrase, Judge Ito's courtroom. And I said, I'm sorry, it's not Judge Ito's courtroom. It's our courtroom. It's the people's courtroom. It's the population's courtroom. We're the one that's paying for all this dress-up and mummery and flim-flam and shenanigans. It's our tax money that creates the laws in the courtrooms. It's our courtroom, not a cult of personality courtroom. We pay the taxes for this mummery. It's one entity of compromise and evasion. It's all artifice, like television. And that's what I'm trying to defeat on this show. I wanted to be a scientist. Roger and I are still scientists, isolating slides of unique humanity, sexy and profound, and present them, instead of making the show into kind of a wax carnival, a way of evading the real calling and bringing into our being our own real creative voices, mine and Roger's. We should challenge any audience, any constituency. Because just like writing, recording words on tape is the same. This is all temporal, ephemeral brainwave patterns on paper, or machines made of metal, claimed for a moment by man from nature, all transient artifacts that will one moment erode back into nature. The magnetic tape will someday erode, the paper will someday erode, and the Inca roads, as Frank Zappa once said, did a vehicle come from somewhere out there just to land in the Andes? And as long as art is this impermanent, like the body I'm trying to heal, we've got to make it count for something unique and different. Not just the same pothead paranoia of the Bill Mitchells. After all, Bill probably got high all the time in the 60s and was always thinking the man was going to come and bust his sacred herb. And that kind of thinking becomes reflexive after a while in a dynamic hall of ever-enlarging mirrors, down the years until the paranoia is all wraparound, until the paranoia is all just sound and fury, signifying monkey. But I shouldn't be so hard on old Bill. He's just like what would happen if Colonel Kurtz made it safely out of the jungle and joined Spinal Tap for a tour. He's probably in the same boat, though, with my employers. After garnering valuable lead after lead for a medical recruiting agency, moving heads of rehab departments around, when I first revealed I was sick to them with high blood pressure, the reaction was to take my office away. The reaction was to give me a demotion. All in my best interest, it was explained. Because if I'm thrown from my office into the center of the outside workspace with all the ambient noise and distractions, it's supposed to make me feel better. Because that's capitalism at its best. They know what's good for me. I don't know what's good for me. I'm just a peon. They're doing it for me. Remember, I can't decide. Destroying wholesale the entire fabric of my effective method of working, my continuity, typical corporate bullshit. But I'm tired of preaching to the already orthodox. You got bon appetit, I got a deboon appetite. I spit out the facts in tiny bites of voracious devour. Yeah, here comes some more poetry, some of my voice again. It's all part of the healing process. The demons in my head, they can't get hungry and they can't get fed. They can't go out and they can't go to bed. They beat on the windows of my eyes till they're red. I've been sentenced to start the sentence. I've been sentenced not to finish the sentence. I've been sentenced to make the world into words inside its own period. Bleeding past dogma, my heart pumping blood uphill through the mass confusion, where there's already a long black train, 16 coaches long, clogging my arteries and racing to my brain. There was nothing new under the gun, and there was no one new behind the knife, brother. I've always got egg on my face when I'm bringing home the bacon. It's the nature of working for a living. Words attempting to describe inner emotions, it's the ultimate difficulty. Putting the three-dimensional into two dimensions, they become ornate jewelry and not the real rustic, caustic thing itself. And in this one-cross town, everyone is bumming nails from me. I'm lost in the traffic of thieves, compromise and evasion. The only triumph on this show is getting inside the masks the guests on it present, slipping between them and their mask for just a second. But most poets in Los Angeles are like Imelda Marcos's shoes. They only come out of the closet when they're sure that they can fit the fashion. Poems should be one clear, long thought, one connection of words, not ideas. Not to educate, but to entertain with the sound of words that is more moving, more primally political, more important than any slogans or ideas. The poems in my head, they can't get laid and they can't get raised. They can't get sober and they can't get dazed. They can't compete and they can't find a place to graze. But I guess only women are worth writing about. The female with her Silver Lake bathrobe and her Echo Park legs. I warp them all with my woofing tender. They wax to my waning song. I ain't bending my grist to fit the muzzle. Because the important thing in life, and the fake half-life of TV, is not to fight the power, but to let the power play itself out, rope-a-dope it. It worked for other champions. Don't fight the power, but fight the fear. Like the first reports on Oklahoma, the news media told us to be afraid, to live in fear. It's the only sensible thing to do anymore. And I had to laugh and think about, here's one bombing in America, and people are being trained en masse through the media to be afraid. Whereas in England 50 years ago, when it was bombed by Hitler's Luftwaffe and V-2s for a year, the cry of the people was to be stalwart, not afraid. To laugh and to make dirty, jeering, filthy songs about the enemy, the common menace, to be brave. But now we're conditioned to be afraid. But like all these feeding frenzy, virtual reality, spiritual banality loops, the Oklahoma thing is all forgotten. All the people that were calling for the public execution of the bombers, when they were presumed to be swarthy knaves from the Middle East, aren't calling for blood anymore, and now it's a good old Desert Storm vet. Yep, a little old dust cloud blew back in from the Desert Storm and rained on his own roost. Because these are the flowers that grow from the floor of Hitler's bunker. Just because the skull got a candle in it doesn't mean it'll lead you out of the darkness.